Alrighty, I am going to go over what in Bloomers sent to me, but I am going to wait a bit. Shit. I am going to wait a bit until people arrive, so skip forward until I'm speaking again. I should put on music in the meantime. You'll know when everything has gotten started once the music stops. How about that? All right. All right. From In Bloomer. So this is from Max Wallace, a message. I don't think Grant has ever said Dylan couldn't have been involved because he was with him. If so, send me that link. Obviously, he has. He didn't know that. That's not the type of thing he would say, nor does it make any sense. Well, he is. Grant doesn't even know definitely when Kurt was killed, and neither does anyone except for the killers. Exactly, like Mark Lanigan, and now we know because of Mark Lanigan's last album with Skeleton Joe, 2:32 a.m. The killer knew, and he put it out there. Anyway, back to this. I assume that he knows, like we do from the same pool of evidence, that Joe Burns' account is impossible. That's not true. But neither Grant nor us can definitely prove that Dylan didn't kill Kurt. Well, it was Mark Lanigan with Dylan, but anyway. It's very hard to prove a negative. All I know is that Joe Burns is lying about many things, and we can prove it. Joe Burns is not lying. He's left out important details. He's told more over time. You can say that's lying by not telling the whole truth at once, but it's just hiding it, keeping it in, and then slowly letting it out. This guy has a lot of PTSD and trauma over what happened to his friend. Okay, back to this. All I know is that Joe Burns is lying about many things, and we can prove it, but most notably the fact that Dylan killed Kurt when and how he claims. It was Mark. Why are they all trying to fucking not talk about Mark Lanigan? Mark Lanigan, sorry. As for what Barth learned or didn't from his own surveillance and from the surveillance of his company, don't make assumptions if you haven't seen his report. So, I'm not willing to say more about what's in the reports, but they are quite important in retrospect, even if they didn't seem so at the time and still don't point to who killed Kurt. Well, what Joe says does. He didn't say everything all at once, but he did over time. Mark Lanigan, there we go. And I've linked all the unsolved mystery tips about Mark Lanigan to Mark Lanigan, even Tammy Hill, who Mark Lanigan mentioned in one of his last books, Sing Backwards and Weep, as being one of his closest friends that he could confide in to about anything. Back to this. And there's a reason he fell out with Grant, even if it's more about ego than a valid grievance, and it definitely makes Grant look better than Barth when it comes to his diligence to the case. Nah, not when you start discrediting eyewitness accounts. It's unfortunate because if he had stayed on the job instead of quitting in a huff, he may have inadvertently cracked the case. I'm so unclear, by the way, why Grant honed in on Callie as the most likely suspect. I disagree, and I am convinced he wasn't the murderer and doesn't know who is. Well, he does. But maybe there's more to his involvement than Grant has seen, but that Grant has seen but withheld from us. I know Grant never claimed he has any evidence that Callie did it, so it might be mostly circumstantial and suspicion, but I haven't seen a clue. So Barth would have cracked the case if he stayed on Thursday? Remember, Barth left Thursday at the on the afternoon of Thursday, April 7th. Sorry. Yeah, so Barth would have known who the killer was had he stayed Thursday, April 7th instead of leaving. Well, it would have been Mark Lanigan there still, possibly. Yeah, going back to Joe's book, as well as Courtney and Tom, and they would have been seen staging the crime scene in the greenhouse. That would have been recorded as well. Unfortunately, surveillance was not to be put on the house, and they wanted it away from the house. Yeah, Courtney is in the Epstein files. Sarah is Jimmy Kimmel. All the A-listers that are loved and adored today with their blue check-marked profiles, showing off their lives and promoting things to be more popular. So, mind me as I sit here and actually really think about this more. I really don't know what to go over now since we know all this. We just got to keep getting it out. The exact time when Kurt Cobain died, 2:32 a.m., we know that because of his killers. Mark Lanigan put it out in his last album with Skeleton Joe. People can discredit me all they want, but over time they will see that I was right. I was correct. And it wasn't about them, and it wasn't about me. It was about Kurt Cobain and getting justice for all the copycat victims of suicides, as well as Kurt's closest friends and family, of course. I'm going to go over more of Daniel Clint Rich, yeah, but Danny wouldn't have been at the house on the early morning of the murder on the 3rd. If anything, he wouldn't have even been at the house on the 7th. He was only used to get Courtney to Seattle. He had no business to go to the house. Matthew thinks he was there getting high, Matthew Ricker. But I think he didn't go to the house, and he heard the news the next day, and he went to the house to check it out after, thinking, what the fuck? He didn't have any involvement in it, though. Till the day he died, he thought, it probably happened, like Joe's book hadn't come out then. He probably thought it was maybe around the 7th still. Because imagine if you bring someone to Seattle and then suddenly there's a murder at their house the next day, or you just hear about it the next day, even though it didn't happen the next day. But to throw that away and dismiss him really quickly was stupid. He wasn't there when the murder happened. If anything, he was there on April 8th. We know that for sure. But if anything, he was used the day before to get Courtney down to Seattle and didn't even go to the house himself, Danny. He shows up the next day looking around thinking, what the fuck? Danny was even in contact with Tom Grant the last week that he was alive. I was on a call with Danny, and Tom called, and he had to go and take it. It was really important for him. I want to go over more of Mark Lanigan's Sing Backwards and Wheat book. and I will pause it in between. I have to find out where we were.
Epilogue.
That's not it.
Shepherdink, you're not leaving this car without paying me, mister. Are you not hearing me, man? What part of no money did you miss? I tried to unlock my door, but he'd locked it with the master switch. Unlock this fucking door, man. Don't you get it? I was robbed.
Dave Grohl, no. Dave Grohl, innocent, happy, having the time of his life. But he even said in an interview he'd like to know what happened too. He has a lot of unanswered questions, and he said, those who hang around people that do drugs are into a bad crowd, and that's just what they do. He kind of said it cryptically.
Broke. Let me the fuck out. I have an armed robbery to report to the police. I will fucking hit you with an obstruction charge, kidnapping, an accessory after the fact to armed robbery.
Oh yeah. If you're able to go back in this, I already spoke about it and read your message. But yeah, Ernie Barth, if he would have stayed there on Thursday, April 7th, he would have seen Tom, Courtney, Mark, Dylan, Callie all together. No wonder he was not supposed to be there. No wonder Tom didn't want him there and Courtney didn't want him there. Those two are conspiring together. They needed to go there the day before the body would be found to make sure that it was staged perfectly. They couldn't just rely on Dylan and Mark and Callie doing it. Here we go.
I quickly lay on my back across the seat and began methodically attempting to kick out the side window with the bottoms of both my feet. A powerful double-footed attack with my heavy boots, threatening to explode the glass with each thrust of my legs. Hold on, the driver yelled, unlocking the door. He got out into the frigid, freezing, foggy night air and quickly walked around the back of the cab to hover over me. Get out of my car, con man, he yelled as I climbed through the door. As I glared at him, considering whether or not I had the strength left in me to sucker punch this fool, he said, "Okay, now go up to your room and get my 6 guilders. I told you, man, I don't fucking have it. Figure it the fuck out. I can pay you later today," I yelled menacingly, my face 2 inches from his, and started walking up the stairs into the lobby. The cabbie ran up behind me and tried to grab a handful of my coat. I clubbed his hand painfully away with my fist. My mind was racing. I'd been ripped off twice already that night. The extreme hurt in my body had me on the edge of a vomiting, pants-shitting trip to the critical care unit. And how the fuck was I going to get more cash up?
Yeah, he would have known that all the killers were there on Thursday. Mark, Dylan, Callie, Courtney, Tom. Well, Tom isn't the killer, and Courtney isn't the one that did it, but she ordered it. Mark is, and partially Dylan as well. Mainly Mark. But if Ernie stayed that day, he would have seen Tom returning with all of the killers and the conspirators to actually have it done. That would have busted Tom in 1994 of April. But they didn't let that happen. They didn't want to get busted, but now they are.
That prick James. It all flooded over me at once, more than I could take. Then the driver started a loud commotion in the lobby. "I have a theft to report. This customer of your hotel has robbed me of the fare from the ride I gave him. Please call the police." My head began to simultaneously melt down and swell up, as if it were being microwaved like a fucking bag of popcorn. I couldn't believe this fuck would still not let me slide. Instead, he was hell-bent on escalating this time-wasting scene to the utmost degree, while I still had to get more money from that bitch James and locate some dope. "Yes, please do call. Call the cops. This man kidnapped and held me against my will. I was held up at knife point and my money was stolen 20 minutes ago. I told that to this man before he offered me a ride to the police station, and now he's trying to fucking blackmail me on top of it." In the middle of this screaming match that I was a second away from turning into a physical confrontation, the girl behind the counter suddenly said, "Mr. Lanigan, if you need money to pay this man, I am authorized to provide you with the cash advance on the card that was left to pay for the rooms." News to me, but I instantly seized on the opening. "Oh yeah, my road manager told me that. 500 guilders, please." And just like that, she began counting it out. I couldn't believe that just when it appeared my painful race had been run, by some totally unexpected hand of mercy, I had been given a sliver of light to grab onto. I had managed to navigate this bent and twisted, desperate maze so far, but I knew it couldn't last forever. Death was on my heels, and I felt sure death would have my head. After collecting my advance of 500 guilders off Wilkins' band credit card, I asked for change of a 10 guilder note. I counted out 6 guilders in coins, dropped it on the floor in front of this rotten cunt of a cab driver, and ran down the stairs and into a cab that drove me back to the square. The square, where I had painlessly scored good, powerful dope several times in the past, yet in this frozen-over wasteland of a brutally cold November hell night turned early morning, with me at the outermost limits of physical and psychic pain that a human body could endure, was now vacant. It had been 16 hours, a television appearance, 2 rip-offs, and a couple hundred painful miles since my last tiny do-nothing hit. I had been on the verge of an incapacitating breakdown the entire time. As the gray light of day began to slowly appear, the taxi dropped me off. I paid the driver, and as weak and sick, cold and tired as I'd ever recalled being, I stumbled out onto the empty street at the now empty square. I began walking at as brisk a pace as I was able, as if that would prevent or slow the nightmare that was soon to come unless I got some heroin into my bloodstream. I walked up to the statue in the square center, then circled it. I walked the streets on the perimeter of the square, each time around increasing my circle, finding not a single soul out on a bitterly cold and now increasingly windy morning in November. Totally, hopelessly sick at this juncture, and nearly 17 hours since my last puny shot, I began to walk up one side and down the other of the canals running through the red light district. I hoped to catch a girl still working or heading home after work and pay her for a fuck she'd not have to endure in exchange for a reliable hookup.
Yeah. Well, unless he hasn't seen where Tom is totally protecting Dylan and Lanigan and Courtney, or if he doesn't see that.
That strategy had worked famously in other countries. In Australia once, I had been in the room of a brothel with an attractive young hooker. She had been shocked that I hadn't wanted to fuck, just pay her to go score heroin for me as I'd stayed waiting alone in her room. She ran out, got 2 rigs and a couple grams that we shared in a room. "Oh my God, I wish every customer was like you," she said, and had asked me if I wanted to get together after she was done working. In the smoky gunmetal light of an icy, fog-covered early Amsterdam morning, I prayed against hope into the void for a similar angel to appear out of the mist, but one would not materialize. Not one single person crossed my path. I stopped and puked. "Here it comes, motherfucker. Get ready. It's go time," I thought. I've given it everything I possess against impossible odds and have been found lacking. There's no shame in defeat. If I was honest, there was nothing but shame in the way I lived my life. I was nothing if not an abject failure, a fucking shitbag liar, a junkie loser if ever there was one. As I stood, hands hanging.
You hear what he just said about himself? And Who Killed Kurt is trying to get people to believe the exact opposite, and so are Mark's friends, of course. But we have Joe Burns, the eyewitness, that's staying loyal to Kurt Cobain and what he's seen happen.
Onto my shoulders like a human self-straitjacket as I attempted to keep my body from collapsing into a heap on the ground vomiting. I heard a strange, bird-like sound coming from out of the thick fog behind me. I looked across the canal and saw a thin, very tall, probably 6'7" man with straight, pitch-black, shoulder-length hair riding a bicycle triumphantly over the cobblestone with no hands on the handlebars. He was making loud, strange, whooping sounds and turning his head from side to side like a giant wild bird of prey, riding exuberantly as if from the scene of some successfully committed bank robbery. I watched as he crossed the bridge coming towards my side of the canal, took a left, then headed directly towards towards me on the small, narrow street on my side of the water. As he got closer, I recognized that the noises and the throwing of his head side to side was not a bird imitation at all. As I watched him twitch and turn all the way down the 50 yards in front of me with a nonstop series of verbal clicks, ticks, grunts, and expletives to go along with the bizarre whoop-whoop sounds invoking some huge prehistoric bird. It was a textbook display of Tourette's syndrome. When he neared, I jumped in front of him, blocking his path with arms held up, money in hand. "Stop!" He slammed on his brakes. "I need some dope, man. Some real dope. Now. Where can I get some?" I croaked in excruciating pain before puking on the ground between my feet and the front wheel of his bike. He quickly looked side to side with the nervous, head-spinning, wide-eyed stare of a gigantic Charlie Chaplin impersonator. Seeing no one, he looked me in the eye and spit 3 balloons into his fingerless gloved hand. So great was my exhaustion and relief that I almost collapsed on the street. "Where do you live?" he asked. "I'm staying at the American on Late Cicada." "Too far. We go to my place." He told me to get on the hard, unpadded metal book tray behind his seat, and facing backwards, we rode for about 20 minutes. My bony ass bounced painfully on the uncomfortable tray, and I puked what seemed like every minute as he banged over train track after train track I never saw coming, which I absorbed with the painful compression of my already bent spine. We finally stopped at one of the thousands of identical Dutch row houses in the city. After he locked his bike to a rack and stole another unlocked bike right in front of his apartment building, we entered the steep, winding staircase. We climbed 5 flights of stairs to his apartment, he carrying the heavy old-school bicycle up the narrow, claustrophobic set of steps, me following behind. I was painfully out of breath, fighting the urge to void the poison in my stomach, bowels, and throat every step of the way. Once inside, he put the bike he'd stolen on top of a big pile of other bikes. The tiny place was completely packed with them, as well as pile upon pile of bicycle parts. While I vomited uncontrollably into his shitter, he got out a clean rig from a new bag of them, grabbed a clean spoon and a glass of clean water. He pulled out a piece of a cotton ball for a small filter, and tearing open a small bag of the store-bought citric acid needed for the dope, cooked and drew me up a very large shot. Seated now on yet another stranger's toilet, with explosive, sick, slick black water firing out of my asshole, I shakily found a vein. Not only did the shot get me well, I actually got fully loaded for the first time in over a week. My savior finally introduced himself as Bram. "I'll take you to meet my connection at 8, and you can get as much as you want," he said, while making his whooping, clicking, clacking, grunting, and tongue-popping array of incredibly authentic bird-like sounds. With each verbal tick came a physical contraction, convulsion, herky-jerky motion, or hand gesture. I felt for this guy who was plagued with such a painful condition and who had been my unlikely hero. I thought about the lonely, solitary existence he must lead in this place, stuffed to the gills with a bicycle and parts hoard, cut off from society because of his affliction. I also couldn't believe that after the nightmarish events of the previous 72 hours, I'd finally done a proper shot, not the tiny amounts I'd been forced by circumstance to limit myself to. I closed my eyes, still not believing my incredible lucky streak. I finally, gratefully, fell into a nod. After again riding on the back of Bram's uncomfortable bike downtown a couple hours later and scoring at 8 a.m., I took a cab back to my room at the American Hotel to catch a few hours of much-needed rest. My personal journey through Hades had taken me to the limits of what I had previously thought I could physically and mentally endure, yet endure it I had. I came awake with a start at 4 p.m. from a generic wake-up call I'd not ordered. Wilkins must have arrived with the band and our soundman Hutch, who rode with us everywhere. I loved Hutch. He knew, of course, as did everyone in band and crew, what terrible shape I was in, but he always went out of his way to put an arm around my shoulder, offer his love and encouragement, one of the few consistent beacons of light in what was an overwhelmingly dark 1,000 miles of midnight I'd forced myself to travel. Mark, did I ever tell you how much I love to run your sound and hear your voice every day? You are my favorite singer, brother. You can do this. You're a master. Don't forget that. He went out of his way to lift me up daily, a genuine, life-saving grace. When I met the band in the lobby for the short walk to the Paradiso in order to set up and sound check, Wilkins scowled, came up next to me and whispered in my ear, "You've done it this time, buddy. All that money is coming out of your final pay for this tour, and I hope you're proud of yourself. James quit today. He wouldn't even come out of his room to talk to me or let me in. You scared the shit out of him, buddy. I'm ashamed of you. James is a family man with 2 young children. Then he shouldn't have gone out of his way to fuck me over and provoke me. I swear to you, Kevin, not only would he not give me my money like you said he wouldn't even open the door to talk. He sat behind his locked door, taunting and threatening me, called me a dirty animal, while I was a completely respectful professional. I was a total gentleman, Kevin. You know me. Who are you going to believe, this prick or a guy you've known for years? We both know I have issues, but when have you ever seen me be abusive or rude to a crew member, or anyone ever, besides Lee, of course? Fuck James. I swear he's mentally ill, and on top of it, he's a pure, mean-spirited dickhead. Excuse my language, but this pisses me off. Fuck his false fucking accusations, dude. Someone should seriously report this to the merch company and get his ass fired so he doesn't rip them off or fuck them over again by being such an out-of-control prick to the next band they put him out on the road with. Don't worry about reporting it, buddy. The company already called today and said we are responsible for finding local vendors to sell at the rest of the shows. They weren't very happy with you. Weren't happy with me? Are you fucking joking? I hope the fuck you told them this was on him. I'm glad that piece of shit is gone. I would have kicked the fuck out of him if he wasn't. He should be fired. He was completely out of line and out of hand. I'll never use this fucking merch company again, sending us this fucking amateur to do a man's job. Character assassination being a lifelong hobby of mine, I skidded wildly out of my lane while trying my damnedest to send that motherfucker James a personal love letter of a parting gift. Back in the UK at the end of the month, we were scheduled to appear on the hugely popular television program Later with Jules Holland. When we got in the night before, I took the tube from our hotel across town to King's Cross, found a street dealer pretty quickly, and bought everything he had. It was enough to see me through that night and would hopefully see me through the day of filming. But it wasn't enough to see me through the next night, nor would it get me all the way back to Seattle. I would have to come straight down to King's Cross after the show was finished and procure enough to get that job done. Starting in the daytime, Jules Holland's show ran well into nighttime, with a format different than any other TV show. 5 or 6 completely different acts, all set up in a circle in the huge studio soundstage where it was filmed. And then, in front of a small live audience, he went around the circle announcing the bands one by one. I was psyched because a band called Electronic was also on the show. They were a group with Bernard Sumner, guitarist of Joy Division and singer of New Order. Both bands I consider to be among the greatest ever, and guitarist Johnny Marr of the Smiths, another heavy favorite of mine. I was deeply disappointed when their tunes turned out to be the weakest of tea. After a couple times around the room, each act had played 2 songs apiece. In between acts, Holland would also play a boogie-woogie song or 2 on the piano, something he'd done before his television career as an early member of the beloved British pop band Squeeze. After running through our songs and enduring the half-baked witticisms of the scripted banter between hosts and guests, we headed back up to our hotel. As we arrived, Josh said, "Hey, Scratch, a good friend of mine is a huge fan and wants to meet you at the after show in our hotel bar." I told her I'd introduce you. "I'm sorry, dude, but I've got somewhere to be. I don't have time for it." I planned on counting out the huge collection of British coins and a few bills I'd managed to accumulate and making one last score at King's Cross to see me through the night and home. "Just 10 minutes, please. She's a cool chick and a great singer. Her name is Martina, and she sings with Tricky." Damn, I thought. I had purchased a copy of Mojo magazine in the airport when we first hit England, and the free CD that came with the issue had been my only soundtrack on this exploratory trip through the hinterlands of hell and deep into its darkest corners. The track Christian Sands by Tricky had been my favorite tune on it, and I had played it obsessively over and over again, listening to it through cheap headphones on my piece of shit portable Discman CD player the entire tour. It had been one of my only sources of comfort. I love her singing. Yeah, I'll meet her, but it's got to be really fast. As I sat up counting my change in my hotel room, Josh called from the bar telling me to come down. My bag of clothes still lost courtesy of British Airways. I had poured by the handful 50 thick, heavy 1-pound coins along with another 10 pounds worth of smaller denomination coins into a doubled-up pair of sturdy, brand new, unworn sweat socks I had recently bought and knotted up at the top. I stuffed it into my coat pocket, tucked 2 rolled-up 50-pound bills into my pants pocket, and left the room. I stopped in the crowded bar as promised to meet Martina. Straight off, I found her funny, friendly, and magnetically attractive. With a slight sting of regret, I knew I had to quickly leave, though I hoped to further explore this intriguing woman's charms at some later date. After promising each other we'd do some music together someday, I headed out onto the street, toward the tube station to King's Cross to find some dope as fast as possible. Our lobby call was early, and I could not allow my search to turn into another infuriating all-night slog, nor could I come away empty-handed. I got off the train and came up out of the station to an unusually empty street. It was cold but not freezing, and I wondered who had hidden all the dealers in London that night. Finally, I spotted a suitably furtive-looking character across the street, hanging out on a shadowy corner. I walked up. "What are you looking for, mate?" "Some gear. Brown," I whispered back. "How much you want?" "I don't know. I gotta see it first." "Okay, follow me." And he began leading me around a corner and into a dark alley. Not wanting a repeat act of my Amsterdam knife point disaster, I looked back over my shoulder a couple times to make sure we weren't being followed in by another weapon-wielding scumbag. I held in my right hand the end of the tightly knotted socks full of the 70-plus heavy coins shoved into my coat pocket. The other hand I curled into a fist inside its pocket to keep it warm. He stopped up ahead of me, turned around, and began fumbling in the inner pocket of his jacket as if to retrieve the dope while walking back towards me. Then he abruptly lunged forward and shoved his hand into my left pocket, thinking that was where I carried my money. "Wrong pocket, shithead," I said, grabbing his wrist with my left hand and pulling the sock out of my right pocket. I viciously clubbed him with it like a truncheon in the side of the head as he fruitlessly fought to pull out of my grip. "You stupid fuck," I rasped as he fell straight to the ground. I leaned down to savagely pound him in the head twice more, taking out the frustration of years of affliction on this hapless dolt. Suddenly, all the repressed anger, pain, and extreme anxiety I'd held on to throughout this entire trying ordeal, one that had carried me way over what body, mind, and soul could handle, came pouring out. As I stood over where he lay, I began kicking him with machine-like repetition and maximum velocity in the head, ribs, groin, back, and face, over and over and over again. All the grief I'd put myself through sadistically transferred to this desperate and foolhardy character who'd simply had the extraordinary misfortune of picking the wrong target. As I continued mindlessly unloading on the guy, my attack was fury-driven, not by the fact that he tried to burn me, but instead because he'd not had the goods I'd been promised. All that ran through my head was that I had better end this beatdown soon, because it was already past midnight, and I would fast have to resume my wearisome late-night search. I absolutely had to find heroin in order to make it home on the plane scheduled to leave at 9 a.m., with a lobby call at 5:30 that morning. As I persisted in the unrelenting beating, I became aware of a dull, cemetery-dead emptiness inside. I had stopped feeling anything at all. No rage, sadness, fear, nothing. I had finally crossed the line and ceased to give a damn about life, death, or any other meaningless thing in between. I only stopped robotically connecting my boot with his body when forced to by sheer, broken exhaustion. Unable to see clearly through itching, irritated eyes blinded by stinging sweat, without thinking, I rubbed at them with the socks full of coins still in my hand. I realized I had just wiped his blood onto my face when I glanced at the now scarlet-stained cloth. under the burning, wet, blood-stained jaundiced eyes of his torturer and would-be executioner, the unsuccessful thief slowly attempted to crawl away from his self-sought torment. Wiping the blood off my face with the sleeve of my coat, I croaked, "You goddamn idiot. I should fucking finish you." Then I turned and walked back towards the station to seek out a real dealer. As I high-stepped down the alley, I heard him groan in agony where he lay, inching away on the ground.
So yeah, that guy, Mark Lanigan, wouldn't hurt anybody, right? No way he's responsible. No way he has any part in Kurt Cobain's murder. Well, that says a lot. He almost beat a guy to death, and he was thinking about doing that. Actually, in Mark's book, too, he actually threatened to kill his mother, and he tried to. His own mom. So maybe other people should talk about that, too. I'm going to go over True Psych Ward's video about Kurt Cobain. I was going over these with Danny when he was alive. And now that I understand what I do, I want to go over these.
Whatever else that we have give claim to have been. Caitlin becomes an important person in this investigation because she's claimed to have been with Kurt during the days that he was in Seattle. According to Courtney Love's father, Hank Harrison, he did an investigation of his own and published it in a book called Love Kills. As part of his research, Hank interviewed multiple people who were close to the Cobains during this time. One of the people he interviewed is Caitlin Moore. Since Caitlin was never interviewed by police, this is the best that we have in terms of putting together a timeline and reconstruct Kurt Cobain's movement during the last days of his life. Saturday, March 26th, 1 a.m. in the morning. Kurt nods off at Caitlin's apartment on Denny Way. Caitlin left the apartment and went to Comet Bar. When she returned at around 2 a.m., she finds Kurt still in the same position on her sofa. She finds about 6 condescending messages on her answering machine from Courtney, asking about Kurt and commanding basically that he get on an airplane and fly out to Los Angeles. Caitlin calls Courtney back and promises her that she will kick Kurt out first thing in the morning. Caitlin said she woke up at around 11 a.m. Saturday morning, and true to her word, she kicked Kurt out. Kurt wasn't happy about that. He tried to tell her that he's been receiving death threats. Caitlin assumes he's making up a story to gain sympathy. He asks her again to stay at the apartment, but Caitlin, fearing Courtney's wrath, says no. Caitlin told Harrison that Kurt did not want to go back to the Lake Washington house. She offered to give him a ride wherever he needed to go, but he declined and just left. Meanwhile, Courtney is in a phone frenzy, calling everybody across the entire country. That's one thing that is consistent across all accounts. Back at the Cobain residence, Callie is alone with one of his girlfriends, Jessica Hopper. Jessica was in town from Minnesota. She was 15 years old at the time. Drug habit. He said he would bounce back and forth between the Lake Washington house and his other girlfriend's house, Jennifer Adamson.
That is Macaulay Culkin's half-sister.
Jennifer was also a teenager in high school. Unlike Jessica Hopper, Jennifer also had a drug habit. As a matter of fact, Callie reports that she was selling it. So he would spend a lot of time at her apartment as well. Since tensions were so high and Kurt refused to communicate with Courtney, she began to use methods to try to control Kurt and the people around them. She phoned Callie and Renee Navarrete, who were her two live-in male nannies, every hour at least. Callie said that his drug habit had gotten so bad at this point that he asked for Jackie Ferry to be sent to Seattle to pick up Francis. Hoping to avoid another tongue lashing, probably ignored her rap until she threatened to do something diabolical. My bet is she again threatened to take the baby away. Same thing happened to me 30 years earlier. This time, Kurt promised to fly to the Exodus clinic by Wednesday night, the 30th. That's when he bought the shotgun.
So he was getting death threats at Caitlin Moore's. Sorry, he was at Caitlin Moore's because he was getting death threats and he didn't want to return back to the Lake Washington house. And she thought he was just trying to gain sympathy and attention just so he could stay there.
Kurt's flight to Los Angeles was originally scheduled for March 29th. Chris volunteered to take him to the airport. Kurt drove his Valant to Christ's and left it parked with a for sale sign in the window. Tom Grant and Dylan Carlson would later...
Right, so the day before Harvey drives Kurt to the Seattle airport, LAX. Yeah, no, I don't know. Fuck, SeaTac, sorry. So before that day, Kristen and Kurt get in that fight.
Find the car parked in the same spot while trying to find Kurt. On the way to the airport, Kurt and Chris began to argue. It is reported that Kurt attempted to jump out of the moving car, presumably because he was telling Chris that he didn't want to go to treatment and demanded to be let out. When they finally arrived at the airport, the confrontation between the friends became physical. Despite Chris's physical advantage over his opponent, Kurt managed to escape. He charged to the exit, screaming, "Fuck you," or something to that effect. Shelley, Chris's wife at the time, says, Chris drove back to Seattle alone, sobbing. He had such a huge amount of love for Kurt. We both did. He was family to us. I'd known him for almost half his life. According to Cross, Kurt made several phone calls on this night, few to a psychiatrist, and at least one to Rosemary Carroll, his attorney. Carroll told him he had options, and she ultimately convinced him to go to Exodus, and his flight was changed to March 30th.
The options, he can obviously divorce Courtney and all that and leave Nirvana.
Courtney also claims that she spoke with Kurt on this night. He told her, "No matter what, just know that you recorded a great album." She said their conversation was pleasant.
This did not happen. Kurt was avoiding all of her phone calls.
There's no record of this phone call.
Suggestion from your sommelier.
One moment.
Using logic and the data we have so far, we can infer that Kurt's state of mind during this time was angry, distrustful, and feeling betrayed. His rage was triggered at those who refused to hear him out and continued to constrict him of his freedom. For example, Kurt's conflicts were limited to specific individuals, whereas others, like his attorney, are at odds completely with the reports that he was losing it. This is consistent with Kurt coming to resolve. Those who felt angry with are those who were being fired by Kurt. He was going on to do his own thing. In case you needed more evidence that Kurt was simply done and ready to move on with his life, Dylan's statements about Kurt's state of mind when they went to purchase the shotgun are further demonstration of this. Dylan says he wanted to buy a gun for protection and because of prowlers, since the police took all his other weapons.
Well, True Psych Ward didn't know Joe's book wasn't out at this time. Actually, I'm going to go over CobainCase.com. Let's see. Summary of events. Well, I really don't know where to go with this now. We know what happened. I guess I'm just going to do more research and try to connect more of Courtney's drawings and more things with Mark Lanigan. Whatever I can find. And then I'll hop back on as soon as I find something. All right. I'll talk to everyone later. Peace.